Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking into a really complex and deeply concerning situation unfolding in Myanmar, specifically as of late May 2025.
Yes, it's a lot to take in.
We've gathered various recent reports, news updates, info from international groups to try and, make sense of this escalating crisis.
It's definitely escalating.
Our goal here is really to pull out the most critical developments, give you a clearer picture of what's happening right now, hitting the key concerns, and maybe some surprising aspects too.
And I think what's immediately clear from the sources is how interconnected everything is. These aren't just separate problems, they seem to feed into each other.
Absolutely. That interconnectedness is key. So we'll try to unpack this by looking at a few major themes.
Okay.
We'll start with the humanitarian side, specifically the Rohingya situation, which is just devastating. Then we'll get into the civil conflict, which seems to be intensifying.
Right, across different regions.
Exactly. Then there are diplomatic moves, some cross-border issues popping up, and finally a really unique kind of resistance we should touch on.
Sounds like a plan. Where do we begin?
Let's start with that tragic news about the Rohingya refugees in the Bay of Bengal.
Okay, yes, the situation there is just terrible. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, they've reported fears that over 400 Rohingya refugees died.
Over 400?
Yes, after two boats capsized back on May 9th and 10th. These are apparently the deadliest incidents for Rohingya refugees so far this year. Just awful.
It's heartbreaking. 400 lives just like that.
Well,
what's pushing people to take these incredibly dangerous risks at sea?
Well, the reports point to a combination of really desperate factors. First, the conditions inside Myanmar are incredibly difficult, especially for the Rohingya.
Right.
And second, the situation over in Bangladesh, where so many have fled, is also getting tougher. There have been significant cuts to humanitarian aid funding.
So less support available.
Exactly. So you have this awful convergence of desperation in Myanmar and dwindling support in Bangladesh, pushing people towards these, desperate measures. It really shows how instability just ripples outwards.
It's a grim example of how these crises connect. Okay, let's shift then to the internal conflict. Reports suggest it's heating up, even in cities.
Yes, definitely. There was the assassination of a retired military officer right in Yangon.
In the main city, wow.
Yeah, a group called the Golden Valley Warriors claimed responsibility. They're described as an urban guerrilla group fighting the junta.
So resistance moving into urban centers more visibly.
It seems that way. It suggests the opposition is maybe broadening its tactics, operating in areas the military might have felt were more secure, raises questions about their capabilities,
It certainly points to how widespread the opposition is becoming. But the impact on civilians isn't just these targeted actions, is it? There are some truly awful reports from other regions.
No, tragically not. On May 12th, there was an airstrike. Reports say it hit a school in the Saging region.
A school?
Yes. And the casualties were, up to 22 people killed, including, reportedly, 20 students.
20 children? That's horrifying.
It is. And what makes it even more disturbing is that this happened even though there was supposedly a ceasefire declared in the area.
So agreements aren't holding.
It certainly looks like a blatant disregard for civilian safety, targeting a school like that.
Yeah.
Serious concerns about whether any ceasefires actually mean anything on the ground.
Unbelievable. And the heavy fighting is ongoing elsewhere, too. You mentioned Bhamo.
Right, in Kachin State. The fighting in Bhamo has been described as really fierce. The Kachin Independence Army, the KIA, and their allies have apparently made some significant gains against the junta.
Gains like taking territory.
Yeah, seizing key military posts, according to the reports. But it comes at a huge cost. Significant casualties on both sides, and crucially, large numbers of civilians are being displaced by the fighting.
Caught in the middle.
Exactly. It's that same terrible pattern. Fighting, maybe some territory changes hands, but civilians suffer massively through casualties and displacement. It's a worrying cycle.
A relentless cycle. Okay, so amidst all this internal fighting and suffering, what's happening on the diplomatic front? Is the international community responding?
There are efforts, yes, but different approaches. Within ASEAN, for example, you see Thailand pushing for more international engagement with the junta.
Engaging with the military leadership.
Yes. Their stated reason is to try and find a way to tackle the civil war and the humanitarian crisis. They're calling for a balanced ceasefire and dialogue involving everyone.
Interesting. A balanced ceasefire. What does that mean in practice?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? But their approach seems to be based on the idea that talking to the junta is necessary for any progress.
Okay, so that's Thailand's approach, but Malaysia is doing something different.
A bit different, yes. The Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, he's apparently started separate talks.
Separate talks? With whom?
With both the junta leader and with the opposition National Unity Government, the NUG.
Ah, talking to both sides, but separately.
Exactly. The aim seems to be to try and create a bridge, maybe facilitate direct dialogue between them eventually, to resolve the conflict. It's a kind of dual-track diplomacy engaging all the key players.
That's a complex diplomatic dance they're trying. And these internal problems, they're spilling over the borders too, right? We're seeing tensions.
Definitely. The NUG, the opposition government, they recently appealed directly to India.
Appealed about what?
Asking India to stop building fencing along the border. This came after a really serious incident in India's Manipur state, which borders Myanmar.
What happened there?
A deadly firefight. Reports say 10 members of the NUG's armed wing were killed by Indian forces.
Wow, that's a major incident. So the conflict is directly impacting regional security.
Absolutely. It highlights just how sensitive those border areas are and how the internal conflict in Myanmar affects its neighbors. Raises questions about who's operating where and relationships across the border.
It really drives home the regional dimension. And then there's this odd situation with border trade you mentioned between India and Myanmar.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. There's an official ban on trade between Mizoram and India and southern Chin State in Myanmar.
Okay, an official ban.
But reports say unofficial trade has actually resumed. People are crossing, goods are moving.
Despite the ban, why?
The most likely reason seems to be sheer necessity. Getting essential goods like food and medicine into Myanmar to help people affected by the conflict. It looks like basic humanitarian needs are driving this, overriding the official rules.
So local realities, survival needs are taking precedence.
It appears so. It shows how local networks can sometimes step in to fill gaps, especially during a crisis. Quite revealing about conditions on the ground.
It's a stark reminder of human resilience, I suppose. Now, there's one more layer to this, something quite unique about the resistance itself, involving cultural figures.
Yes, this is a really compelling angle. Poets in Myanmar. Some have actually joined the fight, taken up arms against the junta.
Poets becoming fighters.
Exactly. There's a specific example mentioned, Maung Songkha. He's known as a poet, but he also founded an armed group, the Bhamo People's Liberation Army.
So he's leading fighters and writing poetry?
Apparently, yes. It highlights this incredible dual role, using poetry, the power of words, to inspire people to keep morale up among fighters while also being directly involved in the armed resistance.
That's extraordinary. Art and armed struggle side by side.
It really speaks volumes about the depth of the resistance, doesn't it? It's not just military or political.
Yeah.
It's cultural. It's deeply personal for many. A powerful testament to the different forms resistance can take.
It truly is. So wrapping up this deep dive, it's clear the situation in Myanmar is incredibly serious, multifaceted, and, well, getting worse, it seems.
Definitely complex.
We've looked at the awful Rohingya humanitarian crisis, the escalating civil war in multiple regions, the complex diplomatic dances, those cross-border issues, and even this powerful cultural resistance.
And when you look at it all together, that interconnectedness we mentioned at the start really stands out.
How so?
Well, the humanitarian crisis fuels desperation. The fighting makes the humanitarian situation worse and creates instability spilling across borders. Diplomacy tries to navigate all of this.
Yeah.
And then you see people turning to any means necessary, even art becoming a weapon. It's all linked.
It paints a picture of incredible human resilience against overwhelming odds, but also underscores the urgent need for something to change, for sustained international focus.
Which brings us to a final thought, perhaps. When you see resistance taking so many forms, from armed groups to poets fighting with words and weapons, what does that tell you?
What does it tell us about the human spirit, maybe?
Perhaps. What does it reveal about the drive for freedom and dignity, even when things seem utterly hopeless? Something worth considering, I think.
A powerful question indeed. This has just been a snapshot, of course. The situation is changing rapidly. We definitely encourage you to look deeper into the sources if you want to stay updated. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.